You wake up, open the chart, and feel that slight tremor in your hands. It's not exactly fear, it's something else. A mix of anticipation and urgency. The market hasn't even started yet and you're already tense, as if something inside you knows you're going to enter too early, exit too early, and repeat the same mistake you swore yesterday you wouldn't make again. The worst part is that you know you're going to do it, and you still do. You click, you trade, you justify. And in the end, there it is again. The silent regret, the weight on your chest, the feeling that control slipped away. You swear next time will be different. But next time never is. This is the invisible cycle. It doesn't scream, it doesn't impose itself, it whispers. It whispers through your anxiety, through your need to recover the loss, through the false sense of power that comes from the click. It's the psychological addiction that traps the compulsive trader and blocks profitability in a subtle but devastating way. You're not losing to the market, you're losing to your own conditioning. The chart merely reflects what's already broken inside you. The mind of the addicted trader isn't looking for profit, it's looking for relief. Every trade is an unconscious attempt to regulate an emotion you don't want to feel. Boredom, guilt, fear, loneliness, inferiority, all of it disguises itself as opportunity. And the market becomes the mirror where you project those pains. It's not about money, it's about control. It's about the desire to feel like you're in charge of something when deep down you feel you've lost control over yourself. That's why the cycle is invisible, because it doesn't show up on the chart, but in your physiology, in the racing heart before you click, in the difficulty of waiting for a setup, in the immediate relief when you enter, as if a weight has been lifted. You call it instinct, but it's withdrawal. Withdrawal from the dopamine that trading gave you in those first wins. The brain recorded that pleasure and now demands you repeat it, even if the context is different, even if the result is destruction. The problem isn't losing, it's what losing does to your ego. Because the compulsive trader doesn't handle losses, he handles humiliations. And every stop loss touches an old wound, the one of not being good enough. So you don't accept the loss as an operational cost, but as a personal offense. And you try to get revenge. The revenge trade is the most expensive defense mechanism there is. It's your mind trying to prove it still has value, that it still deserves to win, but the market doesn't negotiate self-esteem. The cycle starts with the need for relief and ends with more pain. And the more you try to compensate, the more you reinforce the dependence. Every impulsive trade is a neural reinforcement. Every just one more entry engraves a synapse that says, this makes me feel alive. And so, what began as a search for financial freedom turns into emotional slavery. You no longer trade by strategy, but by psychological survival. The amateur believes the addiction is in the screens. The professional knows it's in the mind. Because the market isn't addictive by nature, it's what it awakens in you that addicts. The alternation between pain and pleasure. The unpredictability of the outcome, the intermittent reinforcement that keeps the rat pressing the lever even when there's no food. It's the same mechanism as a casino. The difference is that in trading, the casino is inside your head. The compulsive trader trades to escape himself. He can't stand the emptiness of doing nothing. He confuses inaction with weakness. But patience is the professional's deadliest weapon. While the amateur seeks excitement, the professional seeks clarity. One trades to feel alive, the other trades to multiply capital. One wants to feel, the other wants to grow. That's the difference between addiction and consistency. The invisible cycle has stages. First comes the impulse, the sudden need to enter. Then rationalization. It's just a quick scalp. It looks like a good spot. Next, euphoria. The trade moves in your favor and dopamine spikes. But soon comes fear. Price turns, profit shrinks, heart races. You close early, small profit, relief. Only the market keeps going, and you see price hit the target you had planned. Pain, regret, self-blame, and to compensate, a new click. You just completed one cycle, and every repetition reinforces the same belief. I have no control. That belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because believing you have no control makes you act without control. The mind creates the pattern, and the pattern shapes the result. The market is neutral, but you personalize it. It becomes the battlefield of your own psyche. Trading addiction isn't about greed. It's about emotional escape. It's the same principle as any dependency, avoiding the discomfort of reality through a stimulus that produces temporary relief. Only in this case, the price is high. Every relief costs capital, focus, and credibility. The market doesn't forgive emotional cycles, it amplifies them. You say you want consistency, but you chase the same instant pleasure that destroys you. You want to live off profits, but you feed the same emotions that consume profits. You want financial peace, but you trade in a war. No strategy withstands an anxious mind, and no anxious mind survives long enough to reap the fruits of consistency. What traps the trader isn't the loss. It's the emotional pattern that precedes it. Every impulsive click is an attempt to fix a pain that wasn't born on the chart. It was born much earlier, maybe in childhood, when you learned you're only loved when you get it right. or when you were punished for being wrong. Maybe at school when they mocked your failure. Maybe at home when they promised you'd be someone great. And now, every stop loss is a reminder that you still haven't gotten there. The market becomes the mirror of your deepest beliefs. It reveals what you believe about yourself, about money, about time. It doesn't test you, it exposes you. It exposes your haste, your neediness, your insecurity. That's why the more you fight it, the more it reflects you. You don't lose because the market is hard. You lose because you're trying to beat a mirror. But there is a turning point. It begins when you stop asking how to make more and start asking, why do I need to make it now? That question changes everything because it reveals the emotional void behind the compulsion, the need to prove something, to feel valid, to numb a discomfort that has nothing to do with the chart. The mature trader understands that profit is a consequence of serenity. That discipline isn't forced control, but conscious freedom. That consistency doesn't come from clicking right, but from thinking right. He doesn't try to tame the market. He tries to tame himself. He doesn't run from emotions. He observes them. He knows the real enemy is internal. The invisible cycle only breaks when awareness takes the place of impulse, when you watch the urge to click and decide not to give in. Every time you resist, a new neural connection forms. Every time you wait for the right setup, the brain learns that pleasure is in the process, not the outcome. That's the reprogramming. The addiction dissolves when pleasure changes place. But beware, the mind will try to trick you. It will say everything is under control, that just one more trade won't hurt. It will use logic to disguise compulsion, because addiction is clever. It wears the mask of reason. That's why the first step is humility, admitting you're trapped, that you've lost command. Because as long as you deny the problem, it owns you. And the more you deny, the stronger it gets. Recognizing the addiction isn't weakness. It's the beginning of liberation. It's looking inside and realizing the market isn't your enemy. It's the teacher showing you what still needs healing. In every wrong trade, there's a hidden emotional lesson. And when you learn to see it, the chart changes. Because the chart has always been you. You need to understand something essential. The market doesn't provoke you, it only mirrors you. Every candle is a reflection of your mind. What you feel in front of it says more about you than about the asset. When you feel fear, it's because you're seeing the past. When you feel euphoria, it's because you're projecting the future. And between past and future, you're almost never in the present, the only place where the trader actually wins. Compulsion is born precisely from this inability to be here now. The addicted trader lives between the memory of loss and the fantasy of recovery. You enter a trade and without noticing, you're already thinking about the next one. You exit a loss and in seconds, you're looking for another entry. Your brain has been conditioned to avoid the emptiness between trades. That emptiness is uncomfortable, and that's why you fill it with clicks. The problem is that real growth lives exactly in that space, the space of waiting, of silence, of analysis. That's where the professional gets stronger and the compulsive destroys himself. The addicted mind can't stand slowness. It wants movement, intensity, drama. It wants adrenaline, even if it costs money. That's why the compulsive trader turns the market into an emotional battlefield. He needs the roller coaster to feel alive. Profit and loss become highs and lows of the same drug. And the more he swings, the more he convinces himself he's improving, when in reality he's just sinking with more sophistication. But the problem goes beyond behavior. It's in the belief system that sustains it. From childhood, you were taught that productivity equals movement, that the more you do, the more you deserve, that stopping is wasting time, and the market destroys that logic because in it, inaction can be the most profitable decision. Only your mind doesn't accept that. It feels guilt for not trading, guilt for not making money. So, to relieve the guilt, you click. And every click is momentary forgiveness followed by prolonged punishment. This is the paradox of the modern trader. You seek financial freedom but create your own psychological prison. You're a slave to notifications, charts, the timer. You live trapped to a screen that promised freedom. Trading addiction isn't just chemical. It's existential. It's the desperate search for meaning in every oscillation. And that kills strategic vision. The market wasn't made to satisfy your emotional need. It was made to transfer money from those who react to those who wait. You need to accept that consistency is boring. The true professional doesn't feel adrenaline when trading. He feels peace. He doesn't seek emotion in the chart because he's learned to find meaning outside it. That's why he can wait. While the amateur seeks the pleasure of being right, the professional seeks the power of remaining. Profit is a consequence of remaining. The invisible cycle persists because you confuse discomfort with a sign of error. But discomfort is one of the best indicators of growth. The urge to click when there's no signal is the body trying to escape that discomfort. Resisting is the training. That's how the mind learns it can survive without the dopamine hit. And every time it survives, the cycle weakens. But addiction is cunning. It changes shape. When you try to control entries, it shows up in exits. You start closing too early to secure the profit. It looks like prudence, but it's fear in disguise. Fear of seeing profit evaporate, fear of losing what little you've gained. Only that false prudence destroys risk reward. You protect yourself from discomfort, but you also protect yourself from growth. And without growth, the game loses meaning, which pushes you right back into the cycle. See how the pattern repeats: fear, impulse, regret, promise, relapse. It's the same mechanism as any addiction. You try to compensate pain with quick pleasure. And with every attempt, you reinforce the same pain. The only way out is to invert the cycle. Awareness, waiting, discipline, clarity, result. The difference between the two sequences is that the first is emotional, the second is rational. The trader who doesn't learn to make that transition is doomed to repetition. You need a reality check. The market owes you nothing. It's not the place where you'll prove your worth, nor the stage for your redemption. It's just a neutral mirror. If you go to war with it, you lose. If you try to beat it emotionally, you lose. If you seek in it the cure for your inner emptiness, it multiplies that emptiness. The market doesn't reward emotion, it rewards consistency. Every time you say, this time it'll be different, you're reinforcing the pattern because you're still acting from hope, not evidence. And hope is emotion, not strategy. The professional trades when the chart confirms, the amateur when the mind desires. The professional acts at the right time, the compulsive at the emotional time. That's the difference between building a track record and repeating a trauma. The amateur trader believes discipline is something you conquer. The professional knows it's something you protect, because discipline isn't a state of strength, but of vigilance. The addiction doesn't disappear. It sleeps, and one euphoric day is enough to wake it. The disciplined trader doesn't trust his own motivation. He trusts the system, because he understands that motivation is emotion, and emotion is unstable. The system is the shield that prevents relapse. But here's the most subtle point. Trading addiction isn't just about overtrading, it's about identity. You define yourself as trader, and that label traps you. You feel you need to trade to be who you believe you are, and when you don't trade, you feel you don't exist. That's the deepest addiction, the addiction to identity. The trader who needs to prove he's a trader is doomed to overtrade. The true professional, on the other hand, doesn't need to prove anything. He is a trader even when he doesn't click. Because being a trader is being a strategist, not an operator. It's understanding that the most valuable capital isn't money, but focus. Money is the result of how you use attention, and attention is sucked away by addiction. When you recover it, you recover power. The market is the greatest psychological laboratory in the world. It shows you in real time the reflection of your inner evolution. If you're anxious, it speeds up. If you're impatient, it tests you. If you're arrogant, it breaks you. If you're centered, it rewards you. That's why trading is more about self-mastery than technique. The setup is just the mirror where you see yourself operating. Liberation begins when you realize you don't need to win every battle. You just need to stop fighting the wrong ones. The compulsive trader fights the market. The mature trader fights his own ego. One tries to control the unpredictable. The other tries to understand the inevitable. And in that contrast, the market reveals who is truly prepared. Every wrong trade is a disguised emotional lesson. Every loss has a behavioral pattern behind it. You need to learn to study them without guilt, to observe the mistake without identifying with it. When you learn to watch yourself, the cycle loses strength, because addiction depends on unconsciousness. It needs you to act without thinking, to react without noticing. Mindfulness is the most powerful antidote. Think of the market as an ocean. The amateur tries to swim against the waves. The professional learns to float with them. The compulsive dives in every time without waiting for the right current and drowns. The mature one watches, waits for the tide to change, and enters when risk becomes an ally, not an enemy. Same ocean, two different consciousnesses. You need to decide which side you want to be on. The trader who reacts or the trader who responds. One is a slave to dopamine, the other is master of time. And the difference between them isn't in the setup, but in the mind, because the market is always the same. What changes is the level of consciousness with which you see it. And that consciousness is only born from observed pain, not repeated pain. Every time you feel the impulse and don't give in, you're breaking an invisible link. That's how the cycle dies. Not with force, but with lucidity. Have you noticed that the addiction doesn't start with the click, but with the anticipation? The real trigger isn't the trade itself, it's the thought before it. The moment the mind starts fantasizing about the outcome, imagining the profit, feeling the pleasure before even acting. In that instant, you're already under chemical control. Dopamine spikes before execution. That's why when you try to control yourself during the trade, it's already too late. Self-control has to start before the impulse, in the imagination. It's in the visualization of profit that the addiction feeds, and that's where it needs to be cut. The mature trader learns to watch the impulse like someone watching a wave. He knows he can't stop it, but he can decide not to surf it. The difference is subtle, but it defines destinies. The compulsive identifies with the impulse. I am this urge to click. The mature creates distance. I'm feeling the urge to click. That separation changes everything. Because when you observe the thought instead of following it, you take command. The mind screams, but you don't obey. Addiction needs obedience to survive. Every time you give in, you strengthen it. Every time you observe without acting, you weaken it. And gradually desire changes shape. Pleasure stops being in the entry and starts being in the wait. The professional trader feels satisfaction in not trading when the context isn't clear. He feels power in preserving capital. That's the dopamine of maturity. Silent, serene, lasting. But to get there, you have to cross a psychological desert. It's the period when you already understand the mistake but still feel the desire to make it. When you know what you should do, but the body wants something else. That phase is painful because it dismantles the illusion of control. You realize you're not just dealing with the market, you're dealing with the human mind, and it's undisciplined, unpredictable, and needy. Emotional reprogramming requires patience, and patience is exactly what the compulsive doesn't have. The addicted trader lives in short cycles. He thinks in days, hours, minutes. The free trader thinks in years, decades, generations. He understands the game is long-term, and real power is in compounding, not hunting. Compound interest isn't just a financial equation, it's a life metaphor. Every disciplined decision is an invisible deposit in the account of time, and the longer you remain lucid, the more time works in your favor. But the addict doesn't see time. He lives trapped in the toxic now, the now of urgency, of immediate profit, of, I need to recover. That's the mental prison that destroys the most traders. Emotional short-termism. The market rewards those who can stand boredom, not those who seek adrenaline, and most can't stand boredom. They want emotion, they want movement. They don't understand that boredom is the field where wisdom germinates. Want to know the real secret of consistent traders? They feel less. Not because they're cold, but because they've trained neutrality. They've turned the emotional into the observer. They've learned that emotion isn't the enemy, it's data. And data needs to be interpreted, not obeyed. When fear appears, they ask, what is it trying to show me? When euphoria comes, they question, what am I trying to prove? That introspective curiosity is the antidote to addiction. The compulsive trader, on the other hand, lives reacting. He doesn't interpret emotions, he executes them. Feels fear, exits. Feels anxiety, enters. Feels anger, doubles the lot. Every decision is a chemical reflex, not a rational choice, and the market is merciless with those who act without awareness. It punishes every emotional reaction with mathematical precision. What you need to understand is that the market doesn't punish, it calibrates. It gives you back the level of lucidity with which you face it. The more emotional, the more volatile your equity curve. The more conscious, the smoother your trajectory. Your account chart is just the graphic portrait of your mind. Financial consistency is merely the shadow cast by emotional consistency. There's a phrase few truly understand. You don't trade the market, you trade yourself in front of the market. That changes everything. Because if you really get it, you stop trying to control the unpredictable. You start working on the only variable that can be controlled, your inner state. The professional trader doesn't try to predict the market, he prepares for it. And preparation is the opposite of compulsion. Every time you open the chart without purpose, you're asking the market to educate you by force. And it will, with pain. Because the market is the most expensive teacher in the world. It charges in capital for every lesson humility refused to learn. That's why the mature trader educates himself before being punished. He studies his own mistakes like a scientist observing an experiment. He turns loss into data, and data into wisdom. But there's something almost nobody tells you. The compulsive trader isn't just chasing money. He's chasing validation. He wants to prove he's capable, that he's not a failure, that he'll finally show others, and himself, that he has value. That's the hidden emotional wound behind the compulsion. Trading becomes a stage for personal redemption. Only the market isn't a stage, it's a mirror, and the more you try to prove something, the more it shows you the opposite. That's why the real turning point happens when you give up proving, when you trade without needing to win, when you don't need the trade to work out to feel okay. In that moment, the market stops being an arena of self-affirmation and becomes a field of reading, and the trader transforms from gladiator to observer. The amateur wants to predict the market. The professional wants to align with it. The amateur seeks emotion, the professional seeks probability. The amateur wants to be right, the professional wants results. The amateur seeks approval, the professional seeks clarity. And the curious thing is that emotional clarity is worth more than any indicator. Want to break the cycle? Stop trying to control outcomes and start studying triggers. Ask yourself, what makes me click when I shouldn't? What am I feeling before entering? What am I running from feeling when I force a trade? These questions are uncomfortable, but liberating. Because the problem isn't the trade, it's the emotion that precedes the trade. The disciplined trader isn't the one who feels less, but the one who feels and still chooses the plan. He hasn't gotten rid of fear, he's learned to trade it. He hasn't killed anxiety, he's learned to breathe it. He hasn't defeated ego, he's learned to tame it. That's true mastery. Not eliminating the emotional, but integrating it into the process without letting it decide. The market is the field where you either find yourself or lose yourself. It reveals whether you're a servant of emotion or a master of consciousness. Every candle is an opportunity to choose between impulse and lucidity. And every time you choose lucidity, you're rewriting your identity. The addicted trader trades to feel power. The free trader trades because he already possesses it. Over time, you'll realize that the true pleasure of trading isn't in nailing a trade, but in realizing you no longer need to take every trade. The serenity of seeing a setup appear and simply not clicking because it's not in your plan, that's true freedom. Financial profit is a consequence of that inner serenity. The trader's mind is like the ocean, agitated on the surface, deep at the center. The compulsive lives in the waves. The mature dives to the bottom where nothing moves. That's where the game is won, because the market rewards depth. It respects those who've learned not to react. So the next time you feel the impulse to click for no reason, don't fight it. Observe it. Breathe. Let it pass. Every time you do that, an old part of you dies, and a new part is born. The invisible cycle begins to unravel, not with anger, but with awareness. The market doesn't want to punish you. It wants to teach you to wait. It wants you to learn that consistency is accumulated patience, that discipline is love for the process, that profitability is just the external language of an internally ordered mind. When you understand that, you'll realize the real trade was never with the chart, it was with yourself. There comes a point where every trader needs to stop looking for answers and start facing the mirror. Because as long as you keep trying to find the solution outside, in the indicator, the mentor, the strategy, you'll remain a slave to what's inside. The problem isn't technical, it's psychological, and the invisible cycle only ends when you dare to see what's really driving every decision. Most people run from that confrontation. It's easier to believe you lack knowledge than to admit you lack self-mastery. Easier to blame the market than to face your own reflection. But the market is honest. It doesn't judge you, it just reflects. It doesn't lie, it reveals. It shows exactly who you are when money is at risk. And what it reveals isn't always pretty. Anxiety, haste, pride, neediness, fear. But it's in that mirror that the trader awakens. As long as you run from pain, you'll stay trapped in it because everything avoided grows stronger. Fear of losing increases losses. Fear of being wrong produces more mistakes. The need to control creates more chaos. The cycle is fed by resistance. It breaks with acceptance. When you accept losing, fear loses power. When you accept boredom, haste weakens. When you accept waiting, clarity appears. Peace doesn't come from beating the market, but from ending the inner war. The compulsive trader believes victory is in making more. The conscious trader understands victory is in losing less, because whoever protects capital protects the mind, and whoever protects the mind protects the future. Every emotional decision is a small betrayal of your own purpose, and every act of discipline is a silent reconciliation with your destiny. You need to understand that the market isn't about guessing, it's about enduring, about resisting the impulse to act outside the plan, about respecting time, even when time seems to challenge you. The market is a marathon for those with a sprinter's mind, and addiction is precisely that need to run where you need to walk. The free trader learns to slow down. He understands that every candle is just a fraction of a larger story, that the goal isn't to win the day, it's to win time. He doesn't seek emotion, he seeks longevity, because in the long run, the market always delivers what behavior deserves. The anxious trader reaps volatility, the patient reaps stability, the disciplined reaps freedom. You don't need a new method, you need a new you, because no strategy will work for a mind addicted to stimulation. No setup will compensate for emotional lack of control. No mentor can free you if you keep feeding the same dopamine that enslaves you. The change isn't technical, it's chemical, emotional, spiritual. Yes, spiritual. Because trading is more than a capital game. It's a soul mirror. It forces you to confront what you don't want to see. Fear of scarcity, the arrogance of thinking you're invincible, the pride of not accepting mistakes. The market reveals the man before rewarding the trader. And only when the man matures does the trader flourish. You need to make peace with the process. Understand that every stop is a lesson and every wait is an invisible investment. That real profit isn't money, but self-mastery. When that awareness settles in, the click stops being an impulsive act and becomes an act of wisdom. Every trade becomes a declaration. I don't trade to feel, I trade to build. The mature trader doesn't get excited about wins or despair over losses. He observes, records, adjusts. He knows the market is just the stage where his discipline manifests. Capital is just energy flowing in the direction of consciousness. And consistency is the result of the sum of small right choices made in silence. The addicted mind seeks intensity. The free mind seeks balance. The addicted mind reacts to fear. The free mind responds with logic. The addicted mind trades out of need. The free mind trades out of purpose. When you understand that difference, you'll realize the market was never against you. It was the most faithful mirror you ever had. How many times have you sabotaged yourself knowing exactly what you were doing? How many times did you promise it would be different and fell into the same trap? How many times did the click come before the reasoning? That's the portrait of addiction, knowing and not being able to stop. but there's something stronger than addiction: awareness. And it grows every time you observe the impulse without acting. The cure begins the instant you say enough, not enough to the market, but to yourself. Enough reacting, enough seeking emotion instead of result, enough confusing activity with progress, enough living hostage to a screen. Because trading was made to liberate, not to imprison. And if it's imprisoning you, it's because you forgot the real game is internal. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be the fastest, most technical, boldest trader. You just need to be the most conscious. Because the conscious doesn't need to fight the market. He walks with it. He understands that every loss is a bend in the road, not the end of it. That every pause is part of the rhythm. That every emotion is a signal, not an enemy. In the end, the market doesn't reward the smartest or the luckiest. It rewards the most disciplined. The one who can stand the silence, who respects the plan, who prefers patience to impulsivity. The consistent trader isn't the one who wins every day. He's the one who survives every day. And if you learn to survive long enough, profitability will come as a natural consequence of lucidity. Because the market is a perfect mirror. It reflects, amplifies, and rewards the state of your mind. The invisible cycle ends in the same place it began, inside you.